Hello, people of the world. What's happening in Iran? We could have seen this, but you guys are preventing free speech relative to how high. Right in our faces, what James Madison and the plural founders declassified to be communicated for themselves. You guys have self-value collusion slash us replacing that, increasingly valuing it having been replaced. And all speculation, for the future, all reason, captive entity. That's why there's no bottoms. That's why you guys, markets are going to drop. In other words, the market's dropping, you know that could happen. You should be self, especially since the suburbs were designed tactically to nature. Before America's founders were born, there was a torture, extortion, slavery method entrenched. Just knowing that, things would have surfaced that James Madison communicated. But you guys have the use of the words of everyone pretended they had free speech. James Madison and the founders had declassified. They didn't have free speech. We weren't supposed to pretend any of those words, using it as is science. That's why from America to Russia to Ukraine, Iran, and the readings of if you guys have criminally foreign influence readings of the statutes and precedent of American history of the religious books. The Quran says right up front, and the Old Testament says right up front, only defend right here. Only. And I never even heard anyone say it. It says only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. And that's before the part with the tree, the famous part, and with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You guys can be honest about that part, the difference of it between that and the part before it, which is the part that says only defend right here, and the part that comes before it, which is about the parsing or of the quality of diffusion, of where and how an identity that is relativity to positive, all identities are relative to positive and negative to an extent at the same time. Where and how more positive that will only be and stay more positive onto itself is being made. But it is being made as more positive onto itself here, or as our special difference as Earth through us. We are Earth, but distinctly through humanity, Earth's special difference is being forced away from here. And where there is blame, everyone leaves out exactly the way the breaching method needs. Leaves out the breaching method with logic. This could have been prevented. In other words, if you had followed mandated laws, Iran, in other words, there's things there is no excuse for. Fake news is real. And President Trump tried to use the news in America and across the globe, though, too, because their sources, etc. There is recorded conscious use /s of the departments, for example, at Central Connecticut State University, individually grouped in together. Collusion /s used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. And then they make confessions, is where and how they leak things too. Increasingly, Wethersfield State Judicial Branch offices and corrections offices has collusions with the conjunctions to that and that, the difference of guilt of them, the names next to it, and then all that, because they're even worse, keeps you guys guilt. The breaching method designed the suburbs to be tactically denatured to use everyone remotely from abroad by a torture, extortion, slavery method that you guys pretend is debatable. You guys value speaking about white or black involved with it dishonestly while pretending other. Even when trying to counter it, you guys are collusions with use of difference because you guys were child abused. Because there are principles at grammar school level, at countries A through Z, asserting to him forgiveness is, for example, if we don't leave out the breaching method, we're going to start paying attention to the predicate acts with facts method. It's going to bring up how all sides of criminal and civil cases and the interbranch and the prisons tied to them, they have collusions with the crime scenes that names at next to the body dumping sets. The differences of guilt at are next to the places because there's a path that's been using them remotely through time. Shows that all sides of criminal and civil cases and the interbranch and the crime scenes in the news at the same time. They have to hide the same self-valued sequence shifts as ones involved with the World Trade Center. A sequence shift that used from inside the court affected use remotely of the court's identity. Names on both sides of that case and the identity of the court in Manhattan, New York, right next to the World Trade Center that morning. Same ones involved interstates leading up to it in that context and since. Recorded a number of ways that show that all sides of criminal and civil case. Sandy Hook has a prison, Newtown, Connecticut, involved with the crime scenes of their patients and forced patients and criminals before they were caught. There's a Cintron family from Puerto Rico involved with one of their patients or criminals, maybe still. I don't know what he was in there for. When I caught them forcing a principal child abuser, apparently he's in that prison too now. That prison had rules forcing him with people that were also involved with next to the body dumping spot of the serial killer in that prison. Also, his doctors involved. People from a whole bunch of different countries have roles with psychiatry and roles of organized crime with the prison's family members. And next to campuses is recorded since they were kids. See, people know things about others through others, and people. But if you keep your mouth shut, no anyone speaking about or faking things behind your back. If you open your mouth, it makes you look like you're tied to them. All ages and natures of investigations, investigators at the same time with overt criminal enterprise. That's why I pay attention to use of different/s. We have the same colorized, different colorized at the same time. We have nature teaching us about difference. Nature is an identity that is no other volume, but while it is every volume anyway, even if you make something up, nature's hypervolume science is inseparable from it, from the parts individually, grouped, and simultaneous. We're the hyper-simultaneous. And how the hyper-simultaneous shows us its body. Again, two eyes generated across species bodies, two sexes. The whole time, the counters to the sexual mutilation of the kids by President Trump, their collusion/s. Forgiveness is because there's another name involved. It uses collusions with its use of difference/s, because then it hides that too. Because then when we look back, we see the collusion/s. Everyone's shown that they can't afford the /s part to be discerned. And the slash part is the nature of criminal insidious itself. It's nature itself, positive treatments or negative treatments. And like the value of expertise. That readings of statutes and precedents that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. And per criminally foreign influence, tactically, criminal foreign influence is over the lawyers of the F.B.I. and of Wethersfield police involved further with sexual and medical offenders of kids. But there are, in other words, they've been faking transcripts in triages across the country involved too. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence, please, Judge Napolitano. You guys, the first beginning of the Quran says all that matters is if someone's going to be honest about use of the name. Allah, for the identity of nature. Where we need a scientific value, name for it, to communicate about how nature itself doesn't say it like this, but in other words, nature itself is showing us. It says that that's all that matters. In fact, it qualifies it by saying, don't pray in a mosque for any reason, for the slightest reason. So it doesn't say pray. That's what makes a Muslim. It says all that matters if someone's going to be honest about the name they're going to use. I don't want to use in other words, God, but more probably having been a part of pantheism to teach this about nature's identity, how it is functional, being hyper invisible distinctly from, but still discernible, distinctly from how it is invisible, but still discernible. And if we use a name, like, in other words, we're dealing with the invisible, but still discernible. All the parts of speech about the invisible, but still discernible of English grammar, of the other languages. How and why we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb, like a predicate, a gerund, a present participle or past participle. Know how there are only two of them, and time is involved. Nature is not an identity of forever nature that is making more of its identity of forever nature through temporary slash lasting space nature. The ancients valued how their differences to discern its, and the more we do that, the more we are revealed means to make evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. There's a problem at the in other words, their impositions upon countries like that. In other words, like the countries that have no weapons or no nuclear weapons. In other words, there's energy tied to this. There are energy needs that the breaching method only allowed. The breaching method only allowed natures of industries. No one even pays attention. The breaching method employed the natures of industries to employ names of A through Z differences, including the names. This breaching method knew that only locations, areas, and states across the world could operate the country's names, a part of the system that the ancients understood. Before a breaching method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded the names that could only operate the names of countries to blame other things, others, or selves for what it did. And then it showed them they had to hide that because they don't even know what caused it. In other words, and then when they countered that wrongly, it showed them how they could get caught for that. And then more and more got people defending themselves from defending themselves, valuing themselves without realizing. As syntax systems, tactical ulterior, more and more self-value without really being used remotely, self-valuing while not self-valuing. As syntax systems, tactical ulterior from the one that generates the individual species body of a whole bunch of individual bodies, and is generating other species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies, and with group differences like two eyes, two sexes, generated by nature's identity, so we could discern it. To teach about it, the ancients revealed the scientific value of a God variable involved. We don't have to agree about the name, but as a country, or as a group, as groups, you have to. Not as a country. That's why we're supposed to, as a country, we're supposed to simultaneously allow anyone to use value of religion, but simultaneously we're not supposed to. That's because, in other words, we're supposed to believe freedom. But in other words, we're supposed to appreciate what James Madison left declassified with the plural founders. See, we were supposed to observe how used remotely. In America, Judge Napolitano was a good person. When you guys were kids, you came through classes, you know, good people. So we had forgiveness, where they told American history, leaving out and replacing how we have black people as whites of eyes. That's one of the reasons one of the ways we were capable of discerning from off the campuses that we went, or if you were homeschooled from off your home. There were other influences there. There was another influence /s there. Hyper additionally from nature's, where nature is an influence /s. We are influenced to hunger and thirst, but now through systems abridged, through means abridged, therefore. More energy can be made and saved. And as a greater nature too. In other words, lifting water. I'm dropping water than it takes to lift it. More of my energy, in other words, and the entire ocean is polluted. What to blame is the predicate acts with facts method, and the scientific value of the human fact treatment nature breaching method, the human facts /fact treatment nature. No, facts / fact treatments /fact treatment nature breaching method. It is three ways manifest. As each individual body has the rest of nature's complete identity relationship to yourself itself. If you believe, no, in other words, alpha longs long alphas high is the decipher of the name Allah. And juxtapose energy slash energizing. C. Your C. Jesus. Juxtapose. In other words, alpha. Anyway, we have to admit the ground's tactically denatured from countries A through Z. Here, Anthony, the names of the people of the sciences are not capable. And the people countering are capable, but the people countering them too are not at the same time, with the difference of that. You guys aren't allowing, in other words, there are people would have made means out of nowhere. And that people can't, but you guys, to fathom it, we have to get on the same page, not with the international law where people can't even get our law correctly for our own countries. One of them, we're going to be a group country. That's usually even remotely even easier by the breaching method, even if it's not standing, a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. It is more probably that's what a devil was about, which I never read about a devil. But I read in the beginning of the Old Testament, it said, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences come together, and the part that comes before that. And that's before the part with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve in the names of her generation. So in other words, they can be honest about that part, the part that comes before it, the tree of knowledge of life and of good and evil, or the difference. Now, that's why it's never brought up. And the same thing with the beginning of the Quran. It's where it says all that matters is someone's going to be honest about their use of the name. And it qualifies it by saying don't pray in a mosque for any reason. It doesn't say all that matters if you wear a burqa. All that matters. In other words, you guys are supposed to get through those human differences caused by the breaching method, by not leaving the breaching method out with blame. It abused you all at campuses A through Z. We have principles that we have black people as whites of eyes. We have correlations, means. We have the revelations replaced. Now one has traced. At and next to each of the campuses I went is the phenomenon of ties between those people, as one's involved with the World Trade Center attack. Increasingly, people who are involved with syntax with people named Demora and their educators involved putting me fake ties to them, fake nature ties to them, sequence shifts, wire crime acts and methods with them. These are interbranch families. Their whole careers were used remotely, criminally foreign influenced. Watch every year since the World Trade Center attack, our people in Connecticut who had collusions with the inter and intra cities. They also have remote use /S of the town lines. Weird how they have main people with confessions manifest. See, this breaching method had countries A through Z making confessions to it before religious messengers were even born. It is more probable and demonstrable relative to what is theorized, let alone what is convicted. When you hear voices, you guys are not preventing people from speaking about predicate acts, then you're valuing the styles, needs, and natures behind that, pretending other. You know, they play the games of wire crimes with the phones too, distinctly from their wire crimes with the thing they sold CBS too, reportedly, without hiding, without. See, but the differences of guilt at the networks or next to them is also manifest relative to how this breaching method used and uses names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the news at the same time, the interbranch at the same time with the same sequence shifts. In other words, then needs in the future to hide the same sequence shifts, the same criminally foreign influenced / worse. See, there's worse than just criminally foreign influenced. There are proofs. The breaching method had knew it would be manifest, looking like criminal foreign influences and collusions with it, because it's hyper criminal foreign influences and collusion with it, and counters to it wrongly. So countering hyper criminal foreign influences wrong brings more real criminal foreign influences wrongly countered more too. We are in the negative value. How are we doing easy? The whole world's blowing up. the Ukraine and Russian human bodies are killing human bodies because not one name was used legitimately. People use their own different slash s as styles of logic, natures of logic to get over on others, relative to the readings of the statutes and precedents by a Wethersfield retired police chief who's involved with the World Trade Center attack, with people directly and indirectly. And through silence, because I can't get them on paper. They faked conversations with me at the Wethersfield police station when I was a kid, wasn't at all, and as an adult. In other words, even when I got arrested one time, where there was no conversation the whole time, where they took my fingerprint, that was it. I even noted that he didn't even ask me anything, and I didn't try to communicate with him. In other words, increasingly the class they took me out of has had collusion with proven child abusers, leaders of kids' first forest, more medical and sexual offenders of kids, and they're hiding it by putting fake things in databases with judges and prosecutors and their family members personally involved with them. All kinds of digital crimes and whiting forensics. 2 times they so totally framed me to force me to Hartford Hospital to cover up what I caught them doing with the Leahy family that faked conversations with me there, and a Lombardo family that affected their roles with some untimely deaths, and people at Trinity College and people on my street made confessions about that and tied to it when I was a kid and as an adult, as their roles planting evidences at corners of streets. Also, years apart too, then with the O'Neill family had to plant evidences with them. It has something to do with Clinton people too, increasingly involved with the other countries in the news. In a 1989 Reader's Digest article by Eugene Methvin, involved, in other words, they have also a Peruta family. It was recorded, expressed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the Wethersfield police chiefs and Channel 3 News. And the state judicial branch offices used remotely criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. But this is also Russians against Russians. Right through World War, psychiatry had criminally foreign influence, fact-checking nature, quality aspects of nature. I'm not even a doctor, but I could delineate the delusions from their criminally foreign influence. They're replacing what our founders communicated. They're valuing that while they try to pretend they could speak on reason. You guys are going to learn how to speak on reason in America, and it will help the world. Or there, you guys force them on paper, one name and sequence, because these are little fakes with the religions. These are fakes with the campuses and with integrity. Increasingly, Central Connecticut State University, since before I went there, increasingly has collusions with people on my street, planting evidences from other areas. And as people that planted evidences at each of the campuses I went through behind my back. And there was also fakes for them. Also, the Connecticut news networks planted fake World Trade Center attack evidences. These are also CNN sources next to Central Connecticut State University. Increasingly collusion /S with people. That's in New Britain, Connecticut. They have increasingly collusion /S with intelligence families that used to live in there with multiple police departments at the same time. They had to hide lie progressions. They switched names, forged names. They're all predicate X methods recorded. That's why they can't get on paper since I was a kid legitimately. They're putting fake things in databases. That's hyper additional collusion /S with the breaching methods use of database /S, with the breaching methods employment of the design of suburbs across the world, let alone the cities. That's nature's gonna. It knew that nature would demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures are caused by the design of the suburbs. Even. And it knew effectively could get those negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures blamed on other things, others, or selves, until it was its self-value that is only being and having been known until I've been done. Boxing is fun. One way there is to fight. Everyone wins, or we sense an even greater is revealed. In other words, please follow mandated law. In other words, so there are people involved with the World Trade Center attack, and then they have the audacity to speak about war or peace. In other words, the news is collusions with all kinds of organized crimes with people with the religious spots too. A whole bunch of people tied to I noticed tied to a Kerr family too, and a DeMoro family are involved with the Robert Rodriguez and others with sexual and medical offenders of kids years apart. I never saw Rod Rodriguez on a campus in my life. He's one of the ones with untimely deaths years apart and roles with people that were playing. I didn't respond to him either. The only two times I saw him on my street, and then he confirmed what he was trying to start a conversation with me about on Facebook. And then they took my Facebook page. All these people confirmed to me about body dumping spots tied to the same people involved. Then they took my Facebook page. Facebook's collusions with them with rape threats in the British Superior Court, the same people involved, while they were forcing the principal child abuser. You have little fake punks there. That's some of the men behind black and white women judges involved with some black KKK Confederate flag themed intelligence with Mark Violet and others from Trinity College who've been planting evidence on my street with my neighbors that they forced the collusions with the retired police chiefs and their families and intimate ties. Has something a whole bunch of people with the next to Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they were influenced to federal evidence as crimes on my street, with people also involved with the Route 3 in the corner of Elm Street and Route 3 in Weathersfield and Rocky Hill, and their roles with UPS through time. And then they made those confessions again with different connected people. And these are men and women with the name Bobby, with the intelligence community, involved use remotely criminally foreign influence with overt criminal enterprise, private ones not legitimately. In other words. And then they train her cat, in other words. But they have a whole bunch of the boyfriends, which is real boyfriend or just other intelligence people. Because these are people also involved with their differences, like a Gill family, a Cologne family, with the state police have roles with. Then they're going to think they're going to speak for law. They have collusions intercultural with some black KKK Confederate flag team, Latino team. They're going to put a badge in or gobbles. They know the same thing. They have their kids involved with the same house /S. Multiple police departments. They switch names, forge names, affect confessions intercities, connected. Get them the heck on paper. I've been asking you guys since before the World Trade Center attack. Our country's had collusions through other /S. Then they want to speak about motives. They can't get because they have to screen the breaching method that's recorded their motives. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, please, Americans. In Iran, we're in the same rat trap that needs us to call it a rat trap so they can say, "Oh, we rat. What are you trying to pretend to hide?" In other words, interbranch offensively demonstrated, recorded, confirmed to me how they've been predators. We're putting fake things in databases since I was a kid. Fake ties, you can't be trust them. That's why they can't get on paper here. That's why they can't allow me to be heard on YouTube. And WFSB just keeps speaking because they have wire crime acts and methods with their phones. With whiting forensics, they change and fake and obfuscate and obstruct justice with what's actually recorded digitally in phone records. As police phones, families, and people tied to them are increasingly with their doctors too. Collusions on all sides of my house with Hartford Hospital and with the people involved with predicate acts on my street in Weathersfield. These are also people intercities where I live that have time collusion /S too. Increasingly, people I never even met from my grammar schools, and they try to make big, quick exception too. Because where you have to say that, were they trying to pull things before courts to cover up what I caught them doing? In other words, various natures of courts involved with the same house, further involved with violence too. And a shot was taken at me near me with a pellet gun the day before President Trump was shot at. And this is the same family with extended family members named Scalora that is involved next to the World Trade Center the night before. And involved with people with the court used remotely and names on both sides of that. Involved with them at Central Connecticut State University, Trinity College, next to it, a whole bunch of people with a Scalora family. Fred Grisey sought me out as a complete stranger. Mark Violet and Justin Kavinsky sought me out as complete strangers, you know, and their roles with Tom Perone. These are people involved with interagencies with corruption, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with intercities police departments involved with them, like with the O'Brien family in Cologne, further with Sandy Hook too, with their patients and criminals in the Tide body dumping spots, which are increasingly collusions with names next to the state judicial branch officers and corrections officers. They'll ask you. They confirm this too. They'll tell you that. I don't. The only thing we ever. I don't know them. The only thing I know ever communicated. They have roles with the World Trade Center, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, and screening collusions with the attack through other natures of criminally foreign influence uses of it, and of all location slash s collusion slash s. Everywhere the human species body has a body standing. Please fix the fake news. Pay attention to why and how we have black people's whites of eyes, and where that is inseparable from any proper telling of American history, just like the breaching method. Any proper telling of American history tells what our founders told us to blame the breaching method that prevented them free speech and made everyone pretend they had free speech to an extent. Slash S, otherwise that body was sentenced, and that free speech was applied. That fake free speech was applied as weaponized against everyone. Our founders were totally against slavery. James Madison, those unknown named founders, they forced both the North and the South to have to fight about slavery. I thought it was laws against all women, laws against all natives, laws against black people's rights of eye. But slavery was North and South entrenched right through the Civil War because neither side was allowed to break the rules of the sense and sensibilities of all the groups that were only allowed to be collusion slash S with a hyperforeign breaching method that came from since before religious messengers were born. Nature has been demonstrating the identity the scientists share. Who care? Please focus on the predicate acts, fake conversations to be at CBS, pretended, and ignoring me. And change, in other words, and just they're speaking anyway. They have all kinds of organized crimes. They have all fake conversations, plural, with fake ties to me and others. These are people forcing people into people's conversations dishonestly. They have collusions with lawyers that advertise on them too. Fear to God. In other words, a Trantolo has all kinds of organized crimes in them. All kinds of rules, changing and faking, hiding what people say, obstruction of justice. I barely have any words at all with them. You guys are sick people. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Give me a response for all the confessions and demonstrations and confirmations about the people involved with these networks and the names next to them, like Domain, too. A Domain also has roles, collusions with the method of screaming out sexual things that are Jewish themed about other Jews. And with people that, like a Paul Zano, sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. A John Mayano has collusions with them, with sequence shifts and with Jew syntax. And I never had communications with Paul Zano. That was after my neighbor who was in my same grade graduated. I had to stay back too because they had to hide lipoaggressions. So they do it a little trick. Has something to do with the ones who are also Washington, D.C. and all along roads and routes and town lines and various natures of judges. There's a probate judge tied to a Delafair family. I never saw them around campuses. They're increasingly involved with putting fake nature ties to me with my neighbors named Cololo, with multiple judges and prosecutors, and people with the medical community with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, like name Lombardo too. They have roles with some untimely deaths, with the people that brought up the child abusers campus to me too. They have their Facebook pages interbranch, the Westfield Police, collusions with uses of the campus's Facebook pages, with the FBI too. Oh, but that's not our job. You watch how sick, how fake the integrity. No, they want to use, of course, there's bad things. The breaching method only allows bad things to unfold. In other words, if there's bad people in New York City, because you guys are worse with the campuses, pretending that anyone spoke for science. No one spoke for science. Thank you for listening. Easy. Thank you, people. Have a great night. Maxine, I teach those things.